Doug, welcome to the podcast, man.
Pleasure's mine.
Oh man, I've been listening to you for a long time. I'm a longtime fan of The Herd, and obviously every time you co-host on that, and I actually remember when you were playing at Oklahoma State. I mean, geez, what was it? Late '90s or
2000? We finished that, right? It's actually kind of cool when you clip 2000. It doesn't seem as old as if you say like 90, 97 or 98, right?
That's true.
It's like literally 2 years difference. Like, I finished in 2000. It's like, okay, 21st century. That kind of makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's really been fun to watch you, and something that I love about you is you're able to break things down more than any kind of host usually can, because you play the game at such a high level. You're one of the top assist leaders in the history of the NCAA basketball. And because of that, when I listen, I feel like I get smarter. And that's the only radio shows I like listening to. I don't want to listen to the call-in show. I don't want to listen to the guy that, is just talking. But when I feel like I get smarter, it makes it feel like I use my time wisely.
It's interesting. I appreciate that. And I try and do that with the guests that we have. It's why you don't take calls, right? It's because you don't get smarter when you take calls, right? So like, who do I have on today? Like I have on my radio show, I had Daniel Jeremiah on, and I had Matt Holliday on, right? So Daniel Jeremiah is like the guy for the NFL Network in terms of the NFL draft. He has a great podcast as well. And then Matt Holliday is like a 7-time All-Star, 4-time Silver Slugger. Yeah. And the point is that like, I'm like you, I'm curious, and I want to know like something I thought, you're the expert, you tell me. And so, yeah, you try and be well thought, because I think that in serving the sports fan, oftentimes we've dumbed it way, way too low, right? And most dudes, I think, want to know more.
Yeah, I think those are the shows that are working now, right? It's you, it's
why,
it's Colin Cowherd, it's Nick Wright, it's guys that when you listen to it, you're like, oh, there's a lot more in depth to this.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's still obviously always going to be a place for the old barbershop argument.
Yeah,
and the debate, but we're slowly but surely pulling ourselves out of that to the, hey, it doesn't mean that you can't disagree. And look, I like arguing with people too. Like, I don't give a shit, but I like arguing with people that know what the hell they're talking about.
Sure.
Instead of just people who just say shit that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, well, you'll be in an argument with somebody that doesn't know anything about the sport, and you're just like, okay, like this isn't, I feel like I'm kicking a kid that's, at this point.
But look, we have that in all forms of life, right? Like if you start a discussion with something that's provably false, like what is the point of this argument? Mm-hmm. So, and I think, the political spectrum's not there yet, but I think maybe we'll get there.
That is fascinating. So politics are still, they don't, it's like they don't have those intelligent conversations still. They just
and sports somehow mirrored that. Sports somehow like, I like the Fox News did the 2 box and the argument thing and the left and the right and left and the right and the screen, whatever. And somehow sports was like, we got to do that. And it had a good, probably 2012. So probably about a 10-year run of real success. And now people are like, yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, I turn on Skip Bayless show in the morning, and I feel like there's so much chaos. It's it's just a lot of noise. I want to.
We just invent things. Like you can't
yes.
argue about everything.
And you can tell they don't even believe their own thing they're arguing a lot of the time.
Yeah, I would say Skip does, but again, like, what is it? Does it come from? And like again, like he's no longer on TV, and I think it's a portion of it is, you get to the point you're like, okay.
So true. So wait, so you're coaching at Green Bay now.
Yeah.
How are you doing both of these things? Now, these are two very, high.
So you do a pod. How much of your day does that take up?
An hour, 2 hours.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I do radio and a pod. It's 3 hours of my day. And, I have 2 girls in college, and then my son actually lives in Oklahoma. So I'm a solo dude, with the exception of when he's up there, or when I'm down there seeing him, or I go see my girls. So it's a challenge in terms of your time commitment, but I think what you find, I personally think I needed it, and I needed to do both, just because I need somebody saying we need to. It makes me much more efficient with my day.
It's like when you're going out of town on vacation, right? You can work a half day before you leave. You get everything done. And when you get back, it's like it only takes you a day to get caught up, because you're just so much more efficient.
Yes.
Because you're leaving.
Yes, that's actually a really good analogy. It's completely right on. So, I find myself, first, I'm energized by the idea of doing something that I've always wanted to do, but also doing something that people have said you can't do. That energizes me. And then I'm a competitive person too. And the great thing about coaching is there's actually a scoreboard, where, we have downloads and stuff, but, things can hit on a pod where you're like, that wasn't really that good a pod. It's just, for some reason, Apple picked it up or Yahoo picked it up and it blew up or something. So I need the scoreboard. I needed the efficiency. And then how am I doing it? You get up and I usually wake up with about something to say. I'm not an avid reader, but I like to read about different things in sports. It like stimulates my brain. So I spend, I don't know, half hour, 45 minutes just kind of perusing, usually through Twitter that takes me to, that takes me to things I want to read, and it stimulates me. And then I send a text to my producer, here's what I'm thinking. And he's asleep because he's on the West Coast. And then I get about doing all the basketball stuff. And then from the basketball stuff, then, once we usually go in the morning, and when we're done in the morning, we meet and everybody kind of has their assignments. And then I get into, radio podcast mode, prep a little bit, do the podcast. And then I usually spend like 30 minutes like in complete like silence and just kind of trying to rest my brain, knock out the radio. And then, I'm done at 4 local, and I can either go back to basketball, or we can meet. We can be done for the day.
Well, I guess it probably also helps with recruiting just to have your name out there and then in the spotlight. And you have, so for me, I don't know why I even asked that question, because I have my day job, and it's a 10 to 12 hour a day job. And then I do my podcast for fun, right? I mean, but my podcast brings me all my clients. I run a men's coaching program, a coaching community. Yeah. And so that's where I get a lot of them from, is they hear me do these big podcasts and they're like, oh, I like this guy. I want to learn more.
Correct.
And so I guess it's kind of the same thing for you.
It's the exact same thing. I mean, it's literally the exact same thing. It's brilliant, by the way, what you're doing. So, the other thing is, kids don't listen that much to sports radio, but they do watch like the clips on IG, YouTube clips, the TikTok.
That's what people say. How many people listen to your podcast? Well, maybe 50,000 listen to the podcast, but if I have a good clip, a couple million are going to watch it. A couple million will see it.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And all it takes is one good clip. And then, at our level especially, like, look, Green Bay is not Carolina, Kansas, Duke, et cetera. But, for my level, I have super high level visibility. And we sell that to the kids. It's like, hey, listen, you can play for anybody in our league, but this is the only one where you have a podcast. This is the only one where everybody knows. And it's a chance to build your own brand, within my brand, within the brand of the school.
Well, and like I'm going to watch some games this year. Let me be honest, I haven't even thought about Green Bay college basketball in the last 15 years. I think they made the tournament once or twice, it feels like, or something. Yeah. But otherwise, it's like, that won't even come into my radar, right? But I absolutely want to see how it goes, And because of that, like, this as good as anybody, you're going to get different caliber of kids that'll be there, which then prolongs you, whether you want to stay at Green Bay or go to the next thing or whatever that might look like. I hear Green Bay is quite the town. My dad lived out there for a while, and he just raves about Green Bay. How's the experience been so far?
Okay, so just keep in mind, I'm there May, and this is August.
To the winter there.
Okay, it's August.
Yeah.
So, and I bought a house on the water.
Okay.
And I will tell you, for the last 3 months, it is heaven on earth. I mean, it's literally, the weather is amazing. I live on what would be one of the roads to Door County, and most people haven't heard of Door County unless you're from the Midwest. It's like the Cape Cod of the Midwest.
Okay.
Where you go up there, there's cottages, but they're really nice houses on the water, big pieces of land. Anyway, so mine is like a quasi Door County, but really close to Green Bay. It's 4 minutes from work. So, when I lived in Southern California and working at Fox, I was 51 miles from my studio. When I was at CBS, living in Westport, I was 51 miles from my studio.
Wow.
Right. And so I've cut out the commute time, and it's really energized me. But for me, when you're the new head coach and you haven't won or lost a game, everybody's your best friend the first 3 months, right? I mean, hey, coach, we're so happy to see you, coach.
Yeah.
Secondly, there's a really kind of a entrepreneurial spirit at the school, where they're kind of trying to do some stuff they haven't previously done. And it's the only school in the system that's actually growing in leaps and bounds. And so there's a great spirit there. But yeah, I mean, in the summer, it's, excuse my language, fucking amazing.
I bet.
Like I literally wake up and, there's people on the water, there's pontoons, they're fishing, they're water skiing, they're jet skiing, they're wake surfing or whatever. And, at night it's super calm and chill, and I can go take a kayak out. So I bought a house. You'll love this. I bought a house that was somebody's Verbo.
Okay.
And they lived there some of the time, but verboed a bunch, and they'd done some fishing stuff out of it. So I just said, like, hey, take out your personal shit, leave all that stuff, and we'll go at like a little bit less than what you wanted, whatever. And I closed on it in 14 days, and I've been so happy because, like I said, I was in Westport and I was close to the water. I was in Newport Beach. I was close to water, but waking up and seeing the water is just very calming.
Yeah.
And then the city itself, everybody's friendly. There's no traffic.
Well, a nice little slower pace for a while.
Oh my God.
Too, I bet, right?
Oh my God. Like I was there I did a month stretch before I came back to SoCal to see my mom. And one of my daughters came out here to see her friends before she was going to school. And I got in the car and I was late to something. And like the anxiety, like I don't have anxiety, but like all of a sudden I was anxious because there's just so many cars, so much, negative energy on the road and people cutting people off and giving you the finger. And I grew up in Orange County, so I'm cool with it. But it was a lot as opposed to there. Like there's a couple secrets about Green Bay. One, it's built for football games. So there's no traffic ever because you have these massive freeways and it's 100,000 people. And then, there's farmer's market on a Wednesday. There's all kinds of outdoor music. And, the thing about Wisconsin is the weather's so shitty in the winter that people really celebrate the summer.
Oh, yeah.
So people either like...
They're doing their things.
Yeah, like summer, they're either playing golf, they're fishing, they're going out in nature or whatever, or they're just chilling out outside doing some sort of outdoor activity. So it's been a vacation while working for the last 3 months. I know that's going to change.
Yeah.
But look, when you're coaching college basketball, there's a little secret, right? It's 68 degrees every day because it's 68 in your office and 68 in the gym and 68 in the film room and 68 in the weight room.
Yeah, you probably won't see the sun for about a 4-month period.
No.
You'll be in the office before it gets,
No, I actually, my first day there, second day there, I slept in the office. It was a lot. And I remember getting up and I had parked by this loading dock. And so the cop was like, "Hey, coach, can you do me a favor? Like, not park by the loading dock." I was like, "All right, here's the deal. Okay, I give you my word. I will not park by the loading dock until it gets really, really cold. And then I'm going to park by the loading dock because it's 4 steps from my car right now to the door. And it's 42 steps from my car to the door there. So you got to give Southern California kid a break." He's like, "Okay, coach." He's like, "Can I get some extra tickets?" Like, "Yeah, no problem." So, yeah, people are cool.
How'd you decide to get into coaching? I mean, you have a career already. You're at the peak of your career. I mean, at least one of the people in the top, very high percentage of people that are really excelling at that. How do you decide to just go, you know what? I'm going to add this whole other career to what I'm doing?
So we started, before we did this, talking about how long have you known the Pumps, right? So my dad was a high school coach, became college coach, became like AAU coach. And that's when I met the Pumps. I was like 12 years old. And my brothers have been a college coach for 28 years. So it's always been like, I always wanted to play as long as I can, play professionally, be a broadcaster, and then I'd love to coach. And so I did little things along the way to coach. I had an AAU program. I coached professionally overseas in Israel. I coached in something called the TBT, which is like a tournament for $2 million.
You coached in Russia for a minute too, didn't you?
No, I played in Russia. I didn't coach in Russia.
Okay.
So it'd always been something I'd wanted to do, and I knew I had in me. And I'd interviewed for job after job after job after job, and I actually interviewed for this job a year ago. And then my boss now, Josh Moon's like, "Hey, you're 1B. I'm going to hire Sundance Wicks. I've worked with him before. He's been a head coach. It's a little bit safer." And Sonny did a great job. They went from 4 wins to 18 wins.
Okay.
And then the Wyoming coach, Jeff Linder, left to be an assistant at Texas Tech. And Josh called me and said, "Do you still want the job?" So I've always wanted to do it. I've never really I've gotten really, really close before, like really close, like looking at real estate, looking at a contract, just never gotten it. And, him allowing me to do the radio and the pod, obviously made it a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And, the timing with my girls going to college couldn't have been better. So I don't know. It wasn't necessarily a cognitive decision. I'd been kind of moving that way, like, dude, you do the same thing every day for 21 years.
Yeah, even if you love it,
and I love doing. I love doing sports radio. Like when the times I haven't been able to do it, I feel weird. But you definitely needed something a little new and do a new challenge.
Well, and it's so rewarding. I coached high school baseball for a couple of years, and at the time, I in Utah, a high school called Bingham, and at the time I was one of the top 5 realtors in the state of Utah. That's what I did for my day job was real estate. And I got to tell you, man, it was the most rewarding thing I ever did. You're in for a treat. Like that age of kids,
coaching.
They're so impressionable. They want so badly to do the right thing and to latch on to somebody that can show them, a mentor to show them, how to do the thing. And with all the experience you have, the people you've been able to meet and interview and be around, like you'll be able to pour into them, and they're going to get a Harvard level education at Wisconsin, Green Bay with what you're giving them.
Well, it's also like, it's just, I had a life-changing experience playing college, and that's what I want for the guys. And I won't say his name because I don't know if it was against the rules or whatever, but one of the first days I had the job, I got an invite to go to the Brewers game. And I go to the Brewers game, and I on my IG story, I put where my seats were, and one one of my point guards hit me up. He's like, Coach, I'm at the game. And I was like, dude, come down. We got like better seats. And then we went up in the booth and we met the broadcasters. And, he sends me his text like, Coach, that was amazing. Like, I don't know. I was in broadcasting. It's not that big a deal to me, And so I'll do whatever I told all these guys, like, look, I believe that the college coach's job and the high school coach's job as well, it's like, it's a mentorship. It's you're like my little brother. Like, I got to take care of you. And then for these guys to decide to play for me when I have no track record at all, other than my word, means even more to me. So, like, I promise these guys, like, look, this is not a 1-year relationship, a 2-year relationship. This is a lifetime relationship. When you need a job, when you get married, when you have a kid, dad passes away, your mom gets sick, like, I should be one of the first people you call, and I'll do whatever I can for you. And I love it. I mean, I love having, right now I got like 16 little brothers,
Yeah, it's incredible. Well, and, you having played the position you did, having, your father be a coach and all those things, you're going to come in. I mean, I always want to say, like, if you have somebody that's a point guard that was one of the top assist leaders in the history of basketball, they're going to know the parts of basketball and be able to teach you the game better than pretty much anybody. And so it'll be fun to see how quickly you're able to build something there and use all that skill that you have. You were coming out of high school. I know you were one of the top recruits in the nation. How did you decide? I know you ended up going a couple different places, ended up at Oklahoma State or
Notre Dame first, and then Oklahoma State, and I sat out at a junior college instead because back then you had to transfer and redshirt a year. And that's it. So if you go to a junior college, you get your AAA, you don't have to redshirt at a school.
Got it. Yeah. And so you ended up at Oklahoma State. Was
Eddie Sutton?
Yeah. Sutton was the coach. How was just the experience of college for you versus what you're seeing today? How different is it?
Totally different. It sucks now for guys.
Really?
Yeah, just a couple things. I mean, the first thing is the online classes I hate.
Oh, I hated that. Yeah, I couldn't do that.
Just because, and look, nobody likes getting up for early classes. Nobody likes it when it's cold. I remember when I was at Notre Dame, I lived in the South Quad, and I took the screen off my window, and if I just like stuck my hand out, I was like, oh God, this is going to suck. I don't want to go today, right? Because just the wind was coming. But when you win and you're playing well, I mean, I remember like my junior year, like right about now, like first week of school, right? And I had a really good first year at Oklahoma State, my sophomore year. I just remember like going to class was the best because you didn't have to introduce yourself to a chick or to a guy or whatever because they all knew who you were.
Oh yeah.
Right. Whereas now, like everything's so impersonal, and I think that hurts attendance, right? Because students want to go and see like, hey, that dude's in my math class. I want to go check him out.
Of course, yeah.
Chicks the same, right? It's the exact same thing. So I don't think it's as good. And then you throw in the money, and like there's something special to like nobody has money, right? Like college, like nobody has money.
Yeah, you're playing for completely different purposes.
Like we used to, I'm gonna sell them out. So the assistant AD in charge of facilities at Oklahoma State is a guy named Kyle Waters.
Okay.
Kyle's a stud. He used to run the Home Depot Center. Now he runs all the facilities at Oklahoma State.
Wow.
And he used to have a house on University Circle, which is like, it's next to all the sorority and fraternity houses. And it was just like an old, big old house. And I don't know how many guys lived in it. And every Thursday, we would have Windsor whiskey shots at like 9. And my deal was I was super cheap and everybody knew me, so nobody messed with me. So I was the guy who I'd go to the house. They'd be setting up to have people over, get cards, tables out to play beer pong and shit. And they give me the money and I go to Brown's Bottle Shop and I come back. But again, like we were scraping together to get like Windsor whiskey. We're not drinking any good whiskey, right?
Yeah.
There's something cool
There's
about
beauty in it. Oh,
right?
Yeah.
Whereas now we're like paying kids a bunch of money and they blow it anyway.
Yeah. Well, I remember the worst trip I ever went on. I'm a world traveler and I went with these really wealthy guys to Brazil once for the World Cup in 2014. They got the nicest hotel. They had a private driver the whole time. We went to the nicest restaurants, getting massages every day. It was the dumbest trip I've ever been on in my life. It was like because there was money everywhere. But I've been to Brazil 8 years before that, and we were scrambling, finding girls to let us crash at their place. We were trying to.
I'm not sure I go there in Brazil. Like I hear too many stories about that. Like end up like, where's my kidney?
Yeah, fair enough. We were probably a little reckless.
One kidney.
But there's such a beauty in it.
No,
it was
totally
so
agree.
much more fun when we didn't have money.
Yeah,
and the point is you had to just create madness.
Like, dude, we used to have casino night, and we always have casino night after we get our checks. Okay. And some of the dudes would get Pell Grant checks, right? And like, I just remember when guys would run out of money, like nobody could go to the ATM. Like, you're out of money. Like, dude, we had a guy, Mike Johnson. He was the one guy who had money. And we used to like always like, are you playing cards? Call Mike because we could take his money, right? Because he's the one guy.
He was your ATM.
He was the one guy who could call home. And I'll never forget this. You ever played AC Doocy between the sheets, whatever, right? Yeah. So I walk in, it's casino night. And then, like Christmas break, like nobody's around Stillwater, Oklahoma. It's cold, literally nobody there. So we're all drinking. Most of the guys are smoking Black and Milds. And King Ace High is like the hand.
Yeah.
And somebody had like a Sony Discman in there. He's like, pot. And sure enough, it's a king. And he's like, dude, I'm out of money. Like, put your bike in there.
Yeah.
Dude. And so the next day, my buddy Joe Atkins, who won the pot, waits till like 5 minutes before practice and rides in on the bike and does a lap and then parks it in center court, right? Like, that shit's fun.
That's hysterical.
And so now it's just such a... So, look, there is some good to it in that kids have to learn to manage their money. There is some good to it in that guys that achieve success at a lower level can then elevate themselves and see what it's like at a higher level. If you get under-recruited out of high school, you go somewhere you're going to play, and then if you're good enough. And I think for me, coming in to this kind of, it's a new market. So for college basketball coaches, they don't know how to deal with this shit, right? They don't know how to deal with the constant movement. I've been coaching AAU. Like, dude, AAU, you don't know who's going to show up until they're in layup lines. And when they're in layup lines, they might be on your team and they might be the other one. They might switch jerseys. And, if you don't play a kid one game, like his mom's like, we're out of here. Yeah. And like, dude, we got like 4 games today.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of chaos, but I operate a little bit better in chaos. But for the student athlete today, there's very, very little, I think, outside attention to the actual education piece. It's hard to build culture, and there's not a belief system put into a lot of these parents that culture is important, and that thing I told you about with like being your lifetime coach and your lifetime big brother is a real thing, but people don't know that well enough.
Yeah.
And they just think like, well, I'm going to go to the next, well, here's what happens, dude. When you switch schools every year, what happens? Where do you call your alma mater?
Right. Well, you don't have time to go through the struggle to build the depth of that friendship.
No question.
I ran into one of the kids I coached the other day and it's been 12 years or whatever, and he was with his wife, who he met through me on a road trip we did to a lake house one time. And they've been married now for 10 years. And I just was like, they got their kids there with him, and I'm like, man, this whole thing is a thing because I chose to go coach and built a real friendship with this kid so that when he was done playing, he came with us on our boat trip, and now he's married to one of the women he met on the trip. Like, it's pretty beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, my Oklahoma State, I was there 3 years. Those are my best friends. I actually talked to 3 of them today. And then 2 of them I texted with yesterday. Right. Yeah. So you don't get that. And then the other part is like, your school becomes kind of like your badge of honor and how people know you and what you go back to. Like, okay, there's Hunter Dickinson, for example. Now, he's staying a second year at Kansas, so Kansas will become kind of his alma mater. But he played at Michigan for 4 years. Okay? So, like, do you think he's going to Michigan to call that on his alma mater? Like, no.
Right.
Yeah. Like, all that is lost.
I saw that
the second you leave, like, you're kind of done.
Well, 5 of the last 7 Heisman Trophy winners were transfers. Think about that for a second. It's like you recruit a kid and you're all excited as fans too. It's hard as fans to get even more passionate about it too, because if you fall in love with the kids, they're being recruited even while they're in school. And it's like a constant game of like, wait, who's with us, who's not? It's just a little bit different now. But I want to pivot a little bit. I'm super jealous. Colin Cowherd, I had lunch with him one time. Actually, it was a really cool honor for me. Is really what got me listening to sports heavily, and I think he's the best to ever do it. And you are kind of his right-hand guy on a lot of things. You come in and sub for him a lot. How did you build that friendship, and how did you set up that relationship where you could be such an amazing opportunity to work so closely with him on the herd?
We were both hired at about the same time. His ex-wife Kim, my ex-wife Angie, I remember he came over. We became friends at work, and then he came over for dinner one time. His daughter Olivia was like, she wasn't very old. She was probably like 6, 7 at the time, whatever. And like, it's just, Colin's definitely a different dude in a good way. But like he said, don't worry about Olivia. She's like, she'll take care of herself. And sure enough, like she was drawing her color book. She was fine. But we just kind of hit up a natural friendship. We're both kind of believers in like, if you want to know something, like pick up the phone and call somebody. You know, like one of the things that always disappoints me about people in our industry is like whether you're an insider or not. If you work, I worked for 10 years at ESPN. Like, if you work for 10 years at ESPN, and you call a GM, they're going to call you back. So you might not get the exact story, but they'll give you a sense of what it is. So I think I respect his work ethic. I learned a lot from him. He kind of big brothered me, and I was kind of a little brother. And then, you know, he respected my work ethic as well. And, you know, Colin, like I said, I'll never forget, from ESPN to CBS to Fox, I'd be doing like a college basketball game on a Saturday. And like he'd call me like during the game. And I'd call you back, like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm calling a game. Like, what game? And Carolina, Miami. He's like, I'm watching that game. Is that you? Like, yeah, dude. Oh, my bad. It sounded like your voice. Anyway, so the other thing Colin does to his friends is he kind of test runs rants at you. Like, hey, you ever thought about? And so I love being kind of the guinea pig, a little bit of it. But he's a great guy. He can take a joke.
I love when you and Nick Wright are the two guys I feel like push back on him, like, well, I don't think you got that right, but here's what, and you can tell that you guys know more about the actual sport. Well, but he's so talented at just talking and giving the rant.
But he also knows a lot more than sometimes lets on. But the other part to it is, and this is what I've learned from Colin, and I don't think Nick does it as much as Colin does it. Nick, I don't think ever does it. But Colin's big thing is like, it's okay to be wrong.
Yeah.
Audience actually likes it when you're wrong. So. Yeah. Because they like to go, you're wrong. They still watch.
Yeah.
Now you want your win-loss record to be a little bit higher than.
He had one the other day. I think he talked about how Steph Curry's not made for the Olympics because of his game. Because the first two games he didn't score very much.
He's not.
And then he ends up scoring.
But he's and he was wrong about the Embiid thing. They needed Embiid to win the thing.
Yeah.
But he's actually right about the Steph Curry thing because they can grab you, they can hold you, but. The fucking guy has 17 threes in the last two games.
I know.
I mean, like, I tweeted out, like, I want to get, like, something. Basically, I was, as a coach, I would think, like, midway through the fourth quarter, like, he wasn't playing, and then they put him in, he turned the ball over, like, do you get him out? And then he hits 4 straight threes. And that's why he's the ultimate, he defies all the basic rules because he has this weapon that no one else has had. And it's an ability to make shots at a rate. Even though the level of difficulty for so many people you'd consider it a bad shot, for him, what's a bad shot?
Yeah. How do you keep up with it? Because there's so much sports, there's so much going on, and you have to.
I don't take time off.
Do you have a team that helps you or kind of figures out the topics you're going to speak about, or is it all you doing your own research?
No. I have a really good producer, a guy named Jason Stewart. He used to work for Jim Rome forever.
Oh wow, yeah.
Jay Stu's awesome, and we also see the world a little differently, so that helps. I mean, honestly, behind every really good radio guy. A really good producer.
Really?
Colin right now has my old guy, Ryan Music. Ryan's a young guy, went to Cal State Northridge, like the Pumps, stud, and he's had a litany, Greg Toohey, he's had a litany of really, really good producers. I've had several really good ones. Adam Klug I took with me from ESPN to CBS, and I tried to take him to Fox, but he got he runs a station now in San Diego. So I think part of it is you have to have really good recall. And we call it working, but you got to kind of always be on and be paying attention to stuff. The other thing is, if we're really honest with you, you have to do what's called tree topping. Know a little bit about a lot, not a lot about little. Yeah. And then you got to have a really good producer and somebody who challenges you, and somebody who you can't just go like, "What do you want to talk about?" Let that guy dictate the show, because then you have no passion. So there's kind of a balance there. You have to be somebody you have to work with. So I think that's kind of the way you do it. And then I have a bad habit of never taking time off. Like I would love to go back to ESPN, CBS, and Fox and just go like, hey, I got like 1,000 days banked that I should have taken off, probably led to the downfall of my marriage, right?
I was actually going to ask that. Is it hard on a marriage because you're watching so much sports and then you're working in that field as well? I mean, you're just constantly in that.
I think the hardest part on my marriage was when I left ESPN, I felt like I wasn't going to be relevant, so I was on social media too much.
Oh, there's more social media.
Yeah. And then just, you get caught up in these, like, I used to get caught up in these Twitter arguments, and I was just like, what the fuck was I doing?
Isn't that fun? I look back at some and I'm like,
wasting my life.
Yes. Arguing with,
and God bless my ex-wife. She would say like, what are you doing? You're wasting it. And I thought like, I was like, well, hey, if you're not doing this, you're not relevant. She's like, I don't know about that. It depends on the time zone. I think East Coast time zone is the best if you have little kids, because you put them to bed and then you got like Sunday night football. You can do like West Coast West Coast football, West Coast basketball.
Yeah.
You know, now it's hard when your wife's like, "Hey, do you want to come to bed?" And you're like, "I watch the game." But yeah, it can be hard. I mean, the other part to it is like, let's be honest, like staring at a game and that's not really how it works.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's just not like nobody cares in the third quarter about some play.
Right.
You know, it's all about making a statement,
Well,
having
now-
something to back it up, having at least watched some of it, know what you're talking about, right? Because that's when you really get exposed when you lie.
Yeah.
You know, just talk about the shit you know and don't talk about the shit you don't
Well,
know.
and you can recognize like if a guy can play or not, right? If you've been around the game enough, you're watching the football game, like, okay, this dude's a next level type player. I always say like you can tell which players are the special ones because your wife can notice it on the TV screen.
Yeah.
Right?
In basketball, we say their sneakers squeak different. You know,
Yeah.
they just do. But I mean, it's not a really hard thing. I mean, Mondays in NFL season are hard because
There's so much.
there's just too much.
Yeah.
So you just got to pick one or two things. Like, you know, start with the Cowboys. And national is way easier, I think, than local. Because local, you have to talk about the local
That's
teams.
true. And more people are hyper focused on little things that you maybe didn't catch or
Correct.
you wouldn't know about.
Yeah, like
Whereas-
if you're doing local, you got to watch those
yeah,
games.
you better be taking notes on each
Correct.
play. Yeah.
Whereas if you're doing national, you got to watch. You got to just get the gist of things. But then the big thing is topic selection and understanding like what's really important. And the people and you have to sacrifice your ego and not talk about the things that you want to talk about. Talk about the things that more people want to listen to.
Wow. I think that ESPN job, the first one when you got it, I mean, how old were you when you first got that job?
26.
It's a dream job, right?
Yeah.
Everybody, how did you pull that one?
It's a good story. So when I was growing up, I used to listen to Jim Rome before he went national. He was on locally in San Diego.
Okay.
I grew up in Orange County. He was on late at night. And I used to sneak out of my bedroom to go to my girlfriend's house. And I listened to Jim Rome on the way to her house. And then sometimes the greatest compliment you can ever give a radio guy, and maybe even a podcast guy, right? We have the first roll, second, mid roll, post roll, whatever, is like, I listened to you through a break, or I got where I was going and I stayed in the car until you were done. And I used to do that with Rome. So I always, and then my dad, my high school existence, and even like 8th grade and 7th grade as well, was he would pick me up from school and then we'd go and pick up guys for our AAU team for practice. And like J.R. Henderson was in Bakersfield and Adam Walton, Bill's son, oldest son, was in San Diego. And we had kids in LA. So the parents couldn't get them all the way to practice. So we go here, there, and whatever, and then pick them up, go to practice, and drop them off. I like do my homework in the car, and he had sports radio on the background. So that was just kind of my childhood existence. And so when I was in college at Oklahoma State, I filled in for a guy named Robert Allen locally like one summer, and I thought it was super fun.
Of course.
And then I started, when I was playing overseas, I would fill in Oklahoma City for a guy named Jim Traver. He's been doing it forever. And I kind of lucked out in terms of timing because he's a former major leaguer. And he was, at the time, the color voice for the Arizona Diamondbacks. And the Diamondbacks, if you remember, in 2001, they were good.
Yeah.
Right? They won the World Series.
Yeah.
So he was gone for stretches, or he'd do a show and sometimes take a show off. So I would make $100 a show and $200 extra if it was like on remote at like Red Dirt Trucking, something like that. So I did a little bit of that, and then I played in Russia, and then I played in Israel. And before Israel was a little bit longer stretch of filling in because there was 9/11. So I was actually doing fill-in radio when 9/11 happened. So I actually had a month there where there was like nothing going on basketball-wise. So I did fill-in radio, and I kind of got a little bit of a taste for it. So the next summer, this is summer of 2002, I was home and I was playing for the Oklahoma Storm, who I'd played for it was a USBL team.
Okay.
And Kareem was the coach.
Oh.
And so I worked out a deal where I was playing for this team, and I was the highest paid player, and we drew like 6,000 people a night in Oklahoma City, and I co-hosted a midday show, and I was doing both. And then Kareem was just kind of a dick, and so like I don't know, probably like 7 or 8 games left. I was just like, fuck it, I don't want to play for this guy anymore. So I just did the radio stuff for the rest of I was going to do just the rest of the summer, then go back and play overseas. And I got a call from a buddy of mine who, his name's Brandon Cristal. And Brandon is this little dude. He covers the Broncos now. And I'd never taken a journalism class except for 1 year at junior college. I wrote for the school paper. And I did, you'll love this, I did restaurant reviews.
Oh, wow.
And I only did restaurant reviews because
They paid you to go eat.
correct.
Yeah. It's
Correct.
pretty obvious.
Yeah. So, and he was like super sports nerd. He went to Kansas. I went to Oklahoma State, and he'd come and we'd hang out. We're still friends. So he calls me. He's like, "Hey, I'm working for Golf Digest." I was like, "I'm at the X Games." Like, "Why are you at the X Games?" He's like, "Because I want to be." I was like, "Okay." So he's like, "I met this guy. His name's Dan Steer, and he was Dick Vitale's producer. Now he's the coordinating producer of ESPN." Sweet. How does this involve me? He's like, "Well, he wants to bring you up for an audition, but you don't have. I didn't have a cell phone. You know, I had like a Hotmail address. Right? I didn't have like anything at the studio. So he puts on the phone with me. I go up. And the way they used to do it, I don't know if they still do it this way. For an audition, it was Indiana Purdue from the previous year. And remember, Indiana went to the Final Four in 2002. And you do the first half of the game. You call it like it's like you're calling it live. And then you do the halftime show. And when we got done, he was like, you want to do this. And I did skip one step. When I was a senior at Oklahoma State, we played Kansas in the Big 12 tournament in what is that, Kemp Arena.
Okay.
And we played the early game. So we had like a 7 a.m. shooting time. So coach is like, "We got a 7 a.m. shooting time." And everybody's like, "Fuck that, I'm not going." And I was like, "I'll go." So I literally went by myself with our trainer, two managers, and like one of the walk-ons. And so they fed me. I got a good workout in. And right at the end of my workout, a guy named Tim Allen, who's head of communications for the Big 12, he came and gave me his card. He's like, "Hey, when you get done playing, we want you to call our games." I was like, awesome. So I kept his card, kept in communication. And there's a guy named Pete Durzis who did ESPN Regional. And I just networked and kept like a conversation live with them.
Yeah.
Dan offered me 8 games. And so when I went back home, talked to my wife, and she's like, "Do you want to play?" I was like, "Yeah, I still want to play, but like, is that smart?" And so in my mind, I was thinking, if I go do this now, if I get started at 26, by the time guys that were better players than me quit playing, I'll have like 5 years in the industry. And it worked. So the first year I did, I think 12 ESPN games. And then I did 10, what's called ESPN regional games. And I did actually 2 ESPN regional games. My first year I got cut in Italy because I didn't have an Israeli passport that I was supposed to get. Then I got cut in the CBA. I beat out 13 guys, and this dude named Randy Livingston got cut in the NBA. So then I got cut in the CBA like the day before the first game. And so I did just like 2 games for that guy, Pete Durzis. And I just got like the taste of it. So I did like 10 ESPN regional games. I did 5 Cowboy Sports Property games. And I went to the radio guy, who's the head guy. And I said, "Hey, look, I can make, I don't know, it was like $120 or something playing overseas. I can make 30 doing radio. I've made 30 doing games. Can you get me to 120? So I'll stay here and I'll work for you." And so he said yes. And I did midday radio in Oklahoma City. So then at the end of that year, I went to France and played for like a month and a half. I loved it. And like having watched for a season, having broadcast, I played with like joy, and I didn't have the burden of like, I want to be in the NBA. What am I doing here?
What am I going to do after this?
Yeah. And like Russia, it was so hard to learn European basketball. Israel, like the coach was a little wonky where, I didn't always get along with him. France, it was a younger dude, African guy. He had just retired. And I just went to him when I was a fill-in player at the end of the season. I was just like, "Just tell me what you want me to do, and I won't do what you don't want to do." It's like, but I don't want to do 3-man weave. I don't want to do this bullshit. It's like, tell me, who do you want to get the ball to? What do you want to do against man? What do you want to do against the zone? Let's meet before games. I'll do exactly what you want to do, and just let me play. And it worked great. So I came back and I called Dan Steer and I said, "Hey man," it was a LeBron draft, 2003.
Oh.
So Darko was going to be a top 5 pick, Darko Milicic.
Yep.
Well, when I was in Israel, I played against him twice.
Got it.
And then...
So you were the insider.
Right. And then Boris Diaw, Michael Petrus were from France, and they were in that draft. And so I was like, "Hey, my brother's college coach, so I know all the college guys, and I covered college basketball that year. My dad's an AU coach, so I know all the high school guys, LeBron, et cetera, et cetera. And all the European guys, like nobody else has played 2 professional games against Darko.
Wow.
Played against him. So he's like, "I love it, but I can't use you." I was like, "Fuck." He's like, "But maybe radio could use you." So the head radio guy for remote, because for people who don't know, for ESPN back then, everything is remote and studio. So, and it's like two different silos. So the head of remote radio was a guy named John Martin. I think everybody calls him Chief. And Chief is hard to get a hold of. So I called him, nothing. Fuck. So I got offered a chance to audition for Spike Lee's brother had a movie.
Okay.
So I was like, hey, can you fly me to New York? Yes. So they flew me to New York. I did an audition. And while I was there, I went to the Meadowlands. The Spurs were playing the Nets in the NBA Finals, Game 5. And before the game, I went down, I snuck down, introduced myself to John Martin. He's like, yeah, I heard of you. I was like, hey, Dan Steer said you could use me for the draft because I know all the European guys. Like, oh, yeah. He's like, here, he gave me a card. Call my lady and she'll hook you up and we'll see you at the Marquee next week. So I fly home. I call every basketball agent, every person I know. I get like big notebook of stuff. I know all these guys. Call my brother, call my dad, call you guys. I'm ready. So I fly to New York and we go to the Marriott Marquis. And first, like LeBron comes in and it was like Jesus Christ himself comes in. Like he's different than everybody else. And then, like I actually talked to Darko, Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh. I knew him and we knew each other because he was from Dallas and he used to come to my games at Oklahoma State. We were recruiting him. So all these guys we kind of knew. And we go up to meet and they start playing. When you do an NBA draft, they do like 30-second highlights.
Oh, yeah.
So like they're asking about all these players and there's two other analysts. They're analyzing based upon these highlights. I'm like, these guys don't know.
They don't actually know.
They haven't done any work.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, maybe they're going to get back to the room and they got a bunch of notes. No problem. So the next day we come to the draft and the late Jim Durham used to do the Bulls Forever, the voice of ESPN radio. It was like, alongside, Kevin Lockery and who's the other one? Fuck, I can't remember. I'll think of it in a second.
Sure.
Welcome into Madison Square Garden. And he basically introduced me as like the fourth wheel. And newcomer, Doug Gottlieb. And then so LeBron gets drafted and, they all know about LeBron. Darko gets drafted. They did go to me first. And I was like, hey, I played against Darko Milicic 2 years ago, Hemafon Brozic. Like he was an unbelievable talent. Here's what he does well. Here's what he doesn't do well, et cetera. And then we got to, Carmelo, they'd all see in the NCAA tournament. Dwayne Wade, they all see in the Final Four. We get to Chris Bosh, and they literally had one piece of paper. Actually, two. One piece was the draft order, and they'd write in the guy's name. The other one was the cumulative stats for the team. And I had a big notebook. And so by pick 5, like I was Mel Kiper Jr. for that draft. So I get home, and a guy named Bruce Gilbert calls me, and he says, hey, man, you were great in the draft. I was like, thanks, Bruce. He's like, can you talk any other sport? I go, Bruce, I don't know if you know this, but I actually do sports radio in Oklahoma City, so I'm really good in 3 sports. He's like, what's that? I go, football, spring football, recruiting. I was like, that's my expertise. So he brought me up. Again, I did another audition, and I started doing, 2003, I started doing a show called Game Night. It was 4 nights a week, 6 hours a night. And they dialed me back in terms of games. And the way I got on TV was I could only do TV days I did radio because otherwise they had to pay me $1,000 more, and they weren't going to pay me $1,000 more. So I would go and my show started at 7 to 1 a.m. So I'd get in at 4, and I'd wait and watch Billis and Kirk Herbstreit and, all the baseball guys and anybody who was an analyst and watched how they handle themselves, how they did the camera. Like it was like class for me.
Yeah. Brilliant.
And then eventually they kind of threw me on a couple times when people like no-showed or weather. And so I got a little bit of run. And then I do speeches on something I call Pray for Snow, which is there's a guy named Bill Pito. Bill Pito's like, he does, I think, SNY.
Okay.
Or no, he does MSG. He does pre and post for the Knicks and other stuff. And he had a reoccurring nightmare of crashing and dying with black ice in the Connecticut winter. And so I never knew that, again, like this is 2003 and 2004. So I didn't know shit about the internet, like again, Hotmail account, whatever. And he taught me about AccuWeather.com, and AccuWeather.com had like 21 days out for weather.
Yeah.
So I would know when bad weather was coming because he would always talk about it, because he would tell people like, don't be a hero, Suge. It's icy, it's dicey. Like, stay at the Clarion. Because if you were at ESPN and you didn't want to drive the roads, there's a hotel across the street and they get you a room for a night.
Got it.
So he like, stay at the Clarion, Suge. So by that, I would go in when I know like a snowstorm was coming, because I was the only basketball analyst who lived near Bristol. So Dick Vitale, Digger Phelps, Jay Billis, Fran Fraschilla, whoever, they couldn't get into town if the snow was bad, or they couldn't get to a game. So when I knew a weather was coming in, I would go like, hey, where's Billis coming in from? Like, oh, he's coming in from Charlotte. Like, he ain't gonna make it. So then I go see Dan Steer, I go see Barry Sachs, one of these guys that ran stuff. I'm like, hey, if Billis doesn't come in, you could use me. And sure enough, a couple times they used me, and then I was good enough. Brilliant. They use me again, use me again, use me again. So I tell people all the time, like, I pray for snow. Like, give me some snow, nobody can get in to do a game.
Well, thank you for sharing that. There's so much to learn from that, man. I mean, so many people, they think that opportunity, just like the luck fairy comes and touches certain people, right? And you hear that story, and there's so many pieces to take away from that of how you created your own opportunities.
Okay, so fast forward to this job. You asked how I got this job.
Yeah.
Here's the real way I got the job. Okay. Not this last February, the February before. Josh Moon fires Will Ryan, the head coach. I called Josh Moon, just cold called him. Hey, man, Doug Gottlieb from Fox, what are you doing? I'm doing all right. Like, saw you let Will go. Yeah, it just wasn't working out. Great guy, just not working out. I was like, what do you think about doing? He's like, I don't know. He's like, we really got to, we're in bad shape. I said, well, I'm coming out next week to do Michigan State, Wisconsin. You want to get coffee? Sure. So I red-eyed out. I landed at like 5:30 in the morning. I got my car. I drove to Sheboygan, Wisconsin. And we were supposed to meet at like 8, and I got there at like 7. So I put my seat back. I slept for 45 minutes, set my alarm, woke up, got up, like went inside to Starbucks, brushed my teeth, like made myself presentable, put on some deodorant and shit. And then he gets out of his car and like does a big snot blow and then comes in, and we have a great conversation. And I didn't make it about, I didn't like hard sale him right away. Just getting to know you. What are you thinking? My daughter's kind of a rock star. She's a stud bass guitarist, and we started talking about metal. And like, I had just gone to an Iron Maiden concert with her, so we kind of hit it off as friends. And then we progressed into like, hey, I'd like to consider me for this job. Got all the way to the point where I was a finalist and won some people over, and then he passed on me. But then even when I didn't get the job, like I wasn't a dick about it.
Right. You didn't burn the bridge.
No. And then, Sundance did a great job. Josh did a great job. They both got contract extensions, and I kind of championed it. I didn't know Sunday was going to leave, but then he left. But I got the job. But I got the job because I had the balls I didn't need an agent.
Yeah.
It's just about a relationship. Cold called him, told him my vision, sold him my vision, and then tried to follow up with it. So it's the same thing. It's like you said, you can pray for a lot of things. I pray for opportunity, but then you got to have a find that opportunity to face-to-face, make communication, make contact, believe in yourself, but also, be prepared for that opportunity so you can kick ass.
Well, yeah, it's the other thing. I mean, you had the guts to go for it because you'd prepared for it too. So it wasn't like you were like got on TV to do a basketball game and all of a sudden shit your pants either. You were prepared for the moment, and that gave you the confidence to even try to go in the first place.
Absolutely.
Doug, big fan. Going to be pulling for you this year. When's your first game?
Are we going to get you to the Bay?
I might come out.
Where's home?
Utah, Salt Lake City. You know what, though? I've been wanting to go to a Packers game at Lambeau, so I'm a little 2 for 1.
Okay. Yeah, we can make that happen.
Okay, I'll hit you up. I want to come out.
You just check out their schedule. Tell them we want to come. Okay, come out to the tundra.
Done.
Bring a warm coat. Oh, you're in Utah, but
no, it's that's part of the experience. So you got to sit there and freeze a little bit.
I mean, I got to tell you, like, to go from, I'm a Charger fan.
Oh,
so, but like the Chargers literally play in like the best stadium on earth.
Yeah.
To go from that to now playing now getting to go to the coolest stadium on earth.
Yeah.
Like, that's pretty cool.
I went to a Notre Dame BYU game a couple of years ago, and it was the coldest game ever in Notre Dame since 1988. So that wind came in, and you might as well not have clothes on. It just cuts right through it. I don't even know how it happened. I was just like, I've never been so cold. I remember Notre Dame was marching at halftime, and it was like you'd want to be watching this. And I was in the bathroom because there was like a little heater coming. I didn't even care that I was missing the game, But well, Doug, I appreciate you, man. Thank you again, and good luck on all the success.
Appreciate you having me.
Thanks, man.